This is a serious matter and we need to resolve it immediately. The vehicle is registered to this address and we have reports of suspicious activity.
I kept drumming. I called the cops because my son wanted your car.
This is ridiculous. It's my car, not your son's.
I recently faced my own worst nightmare. It wasn't cartel hit squad or a bank robbery in progress. Honestly, after 30 years in law enforcement, those things are just Tuesday. No, my nightmare wore a floral print blouse, wielded a clipboard like a broadsword, and had a smile that could curdle fresh milk from 50 paces. The HOA President tried to have my 1969 Mustang towed by reporting it stolen. Her excuse? She claimed she was just enforcing the bylaws. But I knew the truth. She wanted it for her spoiled son. Little did she know, I'd be the only one enforcing the law in the end. Let me start at the beginning. Before we dive into the wreckage of her life, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Frank Dillon. If you check the payroll at the city precinct downtown, the name on my badge says Chief. But around here, in this quiet, manicured slice of suburbia called Oak Creek Estates, I'm just Frank. I like it that way. I spent 3 decades dealing with city noise, city crime, and the kind of city politics that make you want to shower twice a day. When my wife, Gina, and I finally bought this house, we paid a premium for one thing: silence. I opted out of the HOA directory. I kept my rank off the welcome email. I didn't want neighbors coming to me to fix their parking tickets or complain about loud parties. I just wanted to be the old guy who mows his lawn on Saturdays and drinks iced tea on his porch. Our house came with a 2-car garage, a small yard perfect for a dog we hadn't gotten yet, and a homeowners association run by a woman named Karen Truman. And yes, before you ask, her name really is Karen. Sometimes the universe isn't subtle. Karen treated this neighborhood like her personal fiefdom and herself like the high priestess. She walked the streets with a measuring tape, looking for grass that was a 1/4 inch too high or trash cans left out 10 minutes past pickup time. But my conflict with her wasn't about grass. It was about the car. It's a 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429, painted in original candy apple red. To car guys, saying it's just a car is like saying the Mona Lisa is just a doodle. It's not just a vehicle. It is a mechanical masterpiece. It was the last piece of my father I have left. He bought it brand new, paid cash, and spent every Sunday polishing the chrome until you could see your soul in it. When he passed, he left it to me. I hadn't turned the engine over in years. It sat in my garage, waiting under a soft, breathable gray cover for a day when I had more time than paperwork. To me, it was a memory, a sleeping beast. To Karen Truman, however, it was an outrage. To her, it was an unregistered, non-operational vehicle parked in plain sight whenever I had the garage door open to work on my workbench. It was a violation of Section 8, Paragraph 3, Subsection C of the bylaws. The rule was ostensibly about maintaining property values, about keeping rusted-out junkers off the lawns. But my car wasn't junk. It was worth more than her kitchen renovation. The first time she brought it up was at the annual Welcome Summer Barbecue. I was standing by the potato salad, trying to avoid conversation, when she cornered me. She held her clipboard against her chest, her posture rigid. Hovering behind her was her son, George. George was 20-something, with a weak chin, shifty eyes, and an entitled slouch of someone who has never worked a hard day in his life. He was eyeing the open door of my garage where the silhouette of the Mustang was visible. "Mr. Dillon," Karen said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had a piercing quality, a low hum of disapproval that grated on the nerves. "We need to talk about the eyesore." I slowly chewed my burger, swallowed, and gave her a polite, tight-lipped smile. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Truman." "Eyesore? That vehicle." She pointed a manicured finger toward my garage. "It's been stationary for 3 weeks. The cover is dusty. The bylaws are quite clear about storing non-functional vehicles. It brings down the aesthetic of the street. It's a project car, Mrs. Truman. It's under a cover inside my garage. I'm pretty sure the bylaws apply to driveways and streets." "Actually," she smiled, and it didn't reach her eyes, "Subsection C applies to anything visible from the public right away. When your garage door is open, it's visible. Therefore, the violation." Before I could respond, George chimed in. His voice cracked slightly. "It's a Boss 429, isn't it? That's a Carcraft motor, right?" I looked at the kid, surprised. "That's right. Built off-site. Hand-assembled." George took a step closer, stepping past his mother. The greed in his eyes was naked, undisguised. You ever think about selling it? I've been looking for something vintage to, fix up. I chuckled. It's not for sale, son. It was my dad's. Karen put a hand on George's chest, stopping him, but her eyes flicked between me and the car. I've interrogated enough suspects to know when someone is calculating leverage, she wasn't looking at a violation anymore. She was looking at an asset. George, we are discussing a code violation, not making a purchase, she said, but her tone had shifted. It was sweeter now, like rotting fruit. Mr. Dillon, surely you can see that a car like that, it's a burden. It's gathering dust. If you can't maintain it to the community standards, perhaps you should consider moving it, or letting someone else take that burden off your hands. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I'll look into the bylaws, Karen, but the car stays. She straightened up, her face hardening instantly. You have 7 days to rectify the violation, Mr. Dillon, or we handle it through the association. Fines can be substantial. And legal actions, well, paperwork is very persuasive. Is that a threat? I asked, my voice dropping an octave. It's a notification, she chirped, turning on her heel. Come along, George. George looked back at the Mustang one last time, licking his lips. As they walked away, I saw Karen whispering something to him, and he nodded, a smirk growing on his face. I should have known then. I should have realized that for people like Karen Truman, no isn't an answer, it's a challenge. She didn't just want compliance. She wanted submission, and she wanted that car. That was day one. I went home, closed the garage door, and told Gina about it. She laughed it off, saying they were just annoying neighbors. But I had a bad feeling. In my line of work, you learn to trust your gut, and my gut told me that Karen Truman wasn't just a busybody. She was a predator, and she had just marked her prey. The week that followed the barbecue was a masterclass in bureaucratic harassment. Karen Truman didn't launch a frontal assault. She laid siege. It started with the official notices. The first one arrived exactly 24 hours after our conversation. It was taped to my front door, not mailed, taped. It was a formal citation for unsightly storage of debris, carrying a $100 fine. Debris. She had classified a 6-figure classic muscle car as debris. I took the notice inside and showed it to Gina. My wife is a saint, but she's also a retired forensic accountant. She looks at paperwork the way a shark looks at a seal. She sees the blood in the water. This isn't right, Frank, Gina said, adjusting her glasses as she scanned the document under her desk lamp. Look at the signature. It's the treasurer, Barry Jenkins. But the date is stamped for yesterday, a Sunday. Since when does the HOA board meet on Sundays to approve fines? They don't, I grunted, pouring myself a coffee. She's fast-tracking it. And look at this. Gina pointed to the bottom of the page. The payment instructions. Usually, HOA fines go through the management company's portal. This one lists a direct P.O. box. That's unusual. I told her to log it. Start file, I said. Label it Truman. By day 3, the notices had multiplied. One for the car. One for my trash being visible from the side angle. One for excessive noise coming from my garage. I had dropped a wrench once. Each notice came a fine, and each fine threatened a lien on my property if unpaid within 30 days. But it wasn't just me. That was the thing about Karen. She understood that to isolate a target, you have to create an atmosphere of fear. I was walking the dog on Wednesday evening when I saw Mrs. Alvarez crying on her porch. Mrs. Alvarez is a 78-year-old widow who lives 3 houses down. She's the kind of neighbor who brings you tamales at Christmas and waves at every car that passes. Maria? I called out, stepping onto her walkway. Is everything all right? She looked up, clutching a piece of paper. Her hand was shaking. Oh, Frank, I don't know what to do. They say they're going to take my house. I gently took the paper from her. It was a final notice from the HOA signed by Karen Truman. It claimed Mrs. Alvarez owed $2,500 in accumulated fines for unauthorized gardening. She had planted marigolds instead of petunias and legal fees. The letter stated that if the balance wasn't paid by Friday, the HOA would initiate foreclosure proceedings to recover the debt. Over marigolds? I felt the anger rising in my chest, hot and heavy. I don't have that kind of money, Frank, she sobbed. My pension. It's just enough for food and bills. You keep this letter, Maria. I told her, my voice steady. Do not pay them a dime. Do not call them. I'm going to handle this. But she said, I don't care what she said. You trust me? She nodded, wiping her eyes. I walked back to my house, the anger settling into a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about a car anymore. Bullying me was one thing. I'm a big guy, I can take it. But terrorizing an old lady to squeeze cash out of her? That's predatory. That's criminal. I spent the next 2 days digging. I pulled the public records on the HOA bylaws. I read every subsection. I realized that Karen was playing fast and loose with the rules, interpreting them in ways that would make a lawyer blush. But I needed more than just bylaw violations. I needed to know the end game. On the morning of day 7, the deadline, I woke up early. The sun wasn't even up yet, just a gray haze on the horizon. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard it. Bang, bang, bang. Someone was hammering on my front door. I glanced at the clock on the microwave. 7 a.m. exactly. Gina was already awake, sitting at her command center in our home office, the blue light of her triple monitor setup reflecting in her eyes. She looked over at me, one eyebrow raised. Showtime, she mouthed. I nodded. I pulled on a pair of jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. I didn't reach for my badge yet. I wanted to see how far she would go. I opened the front door. Karen Truman stood on my porch, clipboard in hand, looking like the cat that had just swallowed canary. She was wearing a trench coat, despite it being a warm morning. Behind her, bouncing on the balls of his feet, was George. He looked nervous but excited, like a kid about to open presents. Frank, Karen said, dropping the Mr. Dillon for a condescending familiarity. I'm afraid we've reached the end of the line. Time is up. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. I made sure to take up as much space as possible. I'm 6'2" and broad-shouldered. Is that so, Karen? It's 7 a.m. Don't you people sleep? Justice doesn't sleep, Frank, she said, and I almost laughed out loud. We are here to execute the removal order. Violation 8.3c has not been rectified. Removal order? I raised an eyebrow. You can't tow a car from private property without a court order or police presence, Karen. I know the law. She smiled, and it was the most dangerous smile I'd ever seen. Oh, I know. That's why I called them. She stepped aside. And as it turns out, she continued, her voice dripping with venomous delight. I had a little chat with a friend at the DMV. That vehicle has no current registration on file. It's essentially abandoned property. And since you refuse to prove ownership, she paused for effect. I took the liberty of reporting a stolen vehicle being stored at this address. The police are on their way. My blood ran cold for a second, not out of fear, but out of sheer shock at the audacity. She had called 911. She had reported a stolen car, my father's car, just to get the police to tow it so her son could bid on it at the impound auction. You called 911? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. You filed a false police report. It's not false if you can't prove it's yours, George sneered from behind her. And once it's impounded, if you can't produce the title, well, it goes to auction. I hear the opening bids are very reasonable. You idiots, I whispered. You have no idea what you've just done. Right on cue, sirens wailed in the distance. They were getting louder, fast. 2 patrol cars came screaming around the corner, lights flashing, cutting through the morning mist. They screeched to a halt in front of my driveway, for officers spilled out, fast, hands on their holsters. This was a social call. They were responding to a felony theft in progress. I recognized the lead car immediately, and I recognized a sergeant stepping out of it, Sergeant Davis, a man I had trained myself 10 years ago, and with him, a young rookie named Miller, looking terrified and ready to draw his weapon. Karen turned to them, waving her arm theatrically. Officers, over here. That's the man. He's refusing to release the stolen property. I stood there on my porch, watching the scene unfold. Karen thought she had just played her ace card. She thought she was about to watch me get humiliated, cuffed, and robbed legally. She didn't know it yet, but she had just handed me the weapon that would destroy her. The air was thick with tension, the kind that usually precedes gunfire. Sergeant Davis walked up the driveway, his hand resting instinctively on the grip of his service weapon. He was all business, eyes scanning the perimeter, assessing threats. He didn't look at me instantly. He was looking at the suspect description Karen had likely screamed into phone. Behind him, Officer Miller, the rookie, had his taser drawn but pointed low. He looked terrified. Good kid, but green. He was trying to process the scene. A manicured lawn, a hysterical woman in a trench coat, a dweeby kid salivating over a car, and a large man standing calmly on the porch. "Officer!" Karen shrieked, stepping forward and pointing a dramatic finger at me like she was in a bad soap opera. "That's him. That's the man hiding the stolen vehicle. I want him arrested immediately for possession of stolen property and resisting a community officer." Community officer. She really called herself that. Sergeant Davis stopped 10 feet from the porch. His eyes finally locked onto mine. The sun was behind me, casting my face in shadow. "Sir," Davis barked, his voice authoritative. "Step away from the door. Keep your hands where I can see them." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just kept my hands clearly visible, palms open, resting near my chest. "Good morning, Sergeant," I said, my voice calm level and projecting just enough to cut through Karen's murmuring. Davis squinted. The familiarity of my voice hit him before my face did. He took a hesitant step forward. "Sir, I'm going to need to see identification and proof of ownership for that vehicle. Now." "Of course," I said. I'm reaching for my back pocket. "Wallet only." Miller's hand twitched on his taser. "Watch him, Sarge," the rookie warned, his voice cracking. I moved slowly, deliberately. This was the moment. Karen was practically vibrating with glee. She turned to George and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Watch this. Honey, this is how the system works for us." I pulled out my leather bifold wallet, but I didn't pull out my driver's license. I flipped the wallet open. The morning sun caught the gold shield pinned inside. It wasn't a patrolman's badge. It was a chief's shield. 5 points, gold inlay, with the city seal in the center. I held it up, letting the light hit it just right. "Sergeant Davis," I said, my voice dropping the civilian tone and adopting the command voice I use in briefings. "I think there's been a significant misunderstanding regarding the definition of a stolen vehicle." Davis froze. He squinted, leaning in. Then his eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. The color drained from his face. So fast, I thought he might faint. He snapped to attention, his posture going from combat ready to inspection ready in a nanosecond. His hand flew off his gun as if it were red hot. Chief Dillon?" Davis stammered. Miller, the rookie, looked from the badge to my face, then to Davis. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He holstered his taser, so fast he nearly missed the belt loop. "Oh my God," he whispered. That's the chief." The silence that followed was heavy. It was absolute. The birds stopped singing. The wind stopped blowing. And Karen Truman stopped smiling. Her smug grin didn't just fade. It melted off her face, replaced by a mask of confusion and dawning horror. She looked at Davis, then at me, then back at Davis. "Chief?" she repeated, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. What do you mean? "Officer, why aren't you cuffing him? He's stealing that car." Davis turned to her. The respect was gone from his demeanor. Now he just looked annoyed and terrified that his boss was watching him handle this. "Ma'am," Davis said, his voice hard, "this is Chief of Police Frank Dillon. This is his residence. And I assume that is his vehicle." George took a step back, nearly tripping over a garden gnome. "The police chief?" he squeaked. "Mom, you said he was a retired janitor." I stepped off the porch, walking slowly toward them. The dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the apex predator, and they had just wandered into my cave. "Mrs. Truman," I said, stopping right in front of her. She shrank back, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "You called 911. You tied up 2 emergency units. You reported a felony theft in progress." The bylaws clearly state." She stammered, her face flushing a deep, blotchy red. "The bylaws are not the penal code, Karen." I cut her off. "You filed a false police report. That is a crime. Misuse of the 911 system is a crime. Attempting to use law enforcement to settle a civil dispute is, well, it's incredibly stupid." I turned to Davis. Sergeant. Yes, sir. Davis Bart. Mrs. Truman here seems to be confused about the nature of property rights. I want you to file a detailed incident report on this false alarm. Flag her name in the CAD system. If 911 receives another call from this address or this individual regarding code violations, it is to be routed to the non-emergency line and flagged for review. Is that clear? Crystal clear, sir. And Miller. I looked at the rookie. He looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Sir. Yes, sir. You handled your approach well. Good triggered discipline. But next time, check the registration database before you draw a taser on your commanding officer. My car is registered. It's just registered as non-operational for tax purposes. If you had run the plates, you would have seen my name. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. Won't happen again, sir. I turned back to Karen. She was trembling now, not from remorse, but from the humiliation of losing control. She had expected a public shaming of me. Instead, she was being dressed down in front of her son and the entire neighborhood. Curtains were twitching in every window on the block. Now, I said, my voice low and cold, get off my property. Both of you. If I see you, your son, or your clipboard pass my sidewalk without a warrant, I will have you arrested for trespassing and harassment. Do you understand? She didn't answer. She just made a choked noise in her throat, grabbed George by the arm, and practically dragged him down the driveway. Mom, my car. George whined as they retreated. Shut up, George, she hissed back. I watched them go. Davis and Miller linger for a moment, apologizing profusely again. I told them to get back to work, real work, and sent them on their way. As the patrol cars rolled away, silence returned to the street. But it wasn't the peaceful silence I had moved here for. It was the silence of a battlefield after the first volley. I went back inside. Gina was standing in the hallway, leaning against the wall with a mug of tea. She had a satisfied smirk on her face. That was dramatic, she said. It was necessary. I replied, tossing my wallet onto the counter. But it's not over. No. Gina agreed, her expression turning serious. People like Karen don't stop when they're embarrassed. They get vindictive. She's going to escalate. I walked into the kitchen and poured the rest of my cold coffee down the sink. Gina was right. I had won the battle, but I had just declared war. And the thing that bothered me wasn't Karen's pettiness. It was the confidence. Why was she so sure the car would be towed? Why was she so certain the police would just hook it and book it without checking the VIN? Gina, I said, looking out the window at the empty street where patrol cars had been. Pull the records for the towing company the HOA uses. Reliable roadside recovery, right? Already on it, she said, walking back to her office. And Frank? Yeah. I'm cross-referencing HOA violation notices with tow logs for the last 12 months. You might want to come look at this. I walked into her office. On her screens, she had a map of the neighborhood. It was covered in little red dots. Each dot is a car towed from the subdivision in the last year, she explained. 42 cars, Frank, all for minor violations. Expired tags, parking on the line, oil leaks. 42 cars in a neighborhood of 300 homes? I whistled. That's statistically impossible for a standard enforcement rate. It gets better, Gina said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I checked the recovery rate. Of those 42 cars, only 3 were ever reclaimed by the owners. What happened to the rest? Auctioned, she said, or so the paperwork says. But look who bought them. She pulled up a spreadsheet. The buyer for almost all the vehicles wasn't a diverse group of used car dealers or scrapyards. It was a single LLC, Oakwood Holdings. Oakwood, I muttered. That's the developer building the new phase of the subdivision. Exactly, Gina said. They tow the cars using the HOA as a pretext. The towing company makes it impossible or prohibitively expensive to get them back quickly. Then they sell them for pennies on the dollar to a holding company owned by the same people developing the neighborhood. I felt a cold anger settling in my gut. This wasn't just a Karen being a pain in the ass. This was a racket. A criminal conspiracy disguised as neighborhood management. They were stealing cars from their own residents, using the bylaws as a weapon. My Mustang wasn't just a trophy for George. It was the next payday. She didn't just want the car for her son, I said, realizing the scope of it. That was just a bonus. She's running a chop shop pipeline out of the HOA office. I looked at Gina. We need to go deeper. If I use the department officially, they'll shred everything before I can get a warrant. We need to do this quietly. Gina smiled, cracking her knuckles. I love it when we work from home. The game had changed. I wasn't just fighting for my lawn or my car anymore. I was investigating a criminal ring operating right under my nose. And Karen Truman had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She invited the chief of police to the party. The fallout from the 9/11 ambush was immediate but quiet. Sergeant Davis apologized profusely before leaving, and I told him to just file a report and flag Karen's name. As the patrol cars rolled off, curtains twitched all along the street. Karen and George's victory lap had turned into a retreat, but I knew better than to think it was over. That evening, Gina and I sat in the kitchen. She had a satellite map of the neighborhood on her laptop, little red dots marking the homes of HOA board members. She's not going to stop, you know, Gina said, sipping her wine. People like that don't back down when they're humiliated. They double down. They just change tactics. I knew she was right. I'd seen it 1,000 times on the job. Bullies only understand one thing: overwhelming force. But I couldn't use the full force of the department just yet. Not without risking a larger investigation into the car theft ring. This was my neighborhood, my home. I had to play by a different set of rules. I had to play her game, but better. The next phase of Karen's campaign was a war of 1,000 paper cuts. It was death by petty harassment. The first fake ticket appeared on the Mustang's windshield the next day. It was beautifully printed on heavy cardstock with the HOA logo embossed at the top. It cited excessive Polish glare, $50. I actually laughed. Excessive Polish glare? I read it aloud to the empty garage. What's next? First degree waxing. I took it inside and examined it under a desk lamp. The font was a Standard Times New Roman, but the toner was cheap. It flaked a little when I creased the paper. Gina scanned it immediately. The QR code for payment links to an unregistered payment portal, she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. It doesn't go to the management company. It goes to a third-party processor. Sloppy. They're skimming off the top. I filed the ticket in a new folder I'd labeled Evidence Harassment. A few days later, chalk lines appeared on my driveway. Not just marks of the tires, but a complete, meticulous outline of the entire car with little arrows pointing to it, and the words violation area stenciled in bright pink. It was childish, but also deeply invasive. Someone had been on my property in the middle of the night, kneeling on my concrete to draw this. I got out a tape measure. The city ordinance requires a vehicle to be parked at least 5 feet from the public sidewalk. My car was parked at 6.5 feet. Her chalk lines were deliberately drawn to make it look like I was over the line. I took photos, logged them, and then washed the chalk away with a garden hose. Neighbor Tony, who was out walking his beagle, shook his head as he watched me scrub. She's a piece of work, that one, he muttered over the fence. Last year, she tried to fine me because my garden gnome was non-compliant with neighborhood aesthetic standards. Don't worry, Tony, I said, spraying the pink dust into the gutter. Her reign is coming to an end. But the escalation didn't stop at chalk. The drone was next. It was a small consumer-grade quadcopter, but it was relentless. At dawn, it hovered by our bedroom window, a black, unblinking eye. It buzzed Gina in the garden. It shadowed me at the mailbox. A constant, buzzing, high-tech pest. This was Gina's territory. DJI Mavic 3, she announced one afternoon, not even looking up from her screen as a drone buzzed outside the window. Signal originates from 114 Willow Lane, the Truman residence. It's registered to George. She cracked a rare, dangerous smile. And its flight path has crossed our property line 17 times in the last 2 days. State peeping and nuisance laws don't love that. Can we jam it? I asked. Illegal, she said. FCC rules. But we can water the lawn. I wasn't going to sink to her level, but I wasn't going to be a passive victim either. My response had to be legal and just a little bit sarcastic. I reprogrammed my irrigation system. The next time a drone made a low pass over the Mustang to check for dust, 3 high-pressure sprinkler heads popped up simultaneously. They fired a coordinated volley of water directly at the hovering nuisance. The drone sputtered, wobbled violently under the water pressure, and made a hasty, dripping retreat back to the Truman house. It didn't come back. With the air war won, I decided to launch a ground assault. I took a page from her own book, the bylaws. I spent a Saturday morning reading the entire 100-page document. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic nonsense, full of rules about everything from the color of your mailbox to the species of your shrubs. And there, tucked away in the landscaping and flora section, was a clause I suspect Karen had never actually read, or simply ignored because she thought she was above the law. Clause 12.4. All front-facing flora must be native to the state to promote water conservation and local ecology. I looked out my window at Karen Truman's house across the street. Her front yard was dominated by prize-winning, perfectly manicured rose bushes. They were French hybrids. Expensive, beautiful, and absolutely 100% not native. I filed an official, anonymous complaint through the HOA's online portal. I included photographic evidence, a botanical analysis I found online, and a direct link to the state's agricultural website listing invasive species. 2 weeks later, a landscaping crew arrived at her house. I watched from my porch with a cup of coffee as Karen shrieked at the foreman. She waved her arms. She pointed at her clipboard, but the foreman just shrugged and pointed at a work order, signed, ironically, by the rest of the HOA board who were terrified of being sued for selective enforcement. They dug them up, every single one of her precious French roses. It was a petty victory, yes. But seeing the look on her face as her babies were tossed into the back of a mulch truck, that was priceless. My final countermove in the paper cut war was the most passive-aggressive. I bought a new car cover for the Mustang, but this one was custom printed. On the side facing the street, in giant friendly 2-foot-high letters, it said, "Project in progress. Ask me about it." It turned her symbol of my non-compliance into a friendly neighborhood conversation piece. People would stop and ask. I'd tell them about my dad, about the engine, about how I hoped to have it running by spring. I was turning her weapon against her, using it to build goodwill with the very neighbors she was trying to turn on me. But all of this, the chalk, the drone, the roses, it was just a game, a suburban Cold War. It was annoying, but it wasn't dangerous. That changed on Tuesday night. That was when neighbor Tony's truck disappeared. It was a 2004 Ford F-150, rusted in places, high mileage, but it was his livelihood. He was a handyman, and all his tools were in the back. He came to my door the next morning, looking panicked. "Frank, it's gone. My truck, I parked it right there last night. Now it's just empty space. Did you hear anything?" I asked, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Nothing. I woke up and it was gone. No broken glass." He looked down, defeated. "I got a violation notice a week ago. A small oil leak on the pavement. The notice said if it wasn't rectified, the vehicle could be towed." He looked at me with desperate eyes. "I cleaned it up, Frank. I scrubbed that driveway, but they took it anyway. I made some quiet calls. The truck wasn't in the city impound lot. None of the major legitimate towing companies had a record of it. It had simply vanished." Gina, meanwhile, was digging. She cross-referenced the time of the theft with the GPS data she had been secretly logging from the reliable roadside recovery trucks, data she obtained by exploiting a security flaw in their dispatch software. Don't ask, she's a wizard. "Frank," she called out from the office. Her voice wasn't playful anymore. "I found Tony's truck." "Where?" "It's not at a tow yard," she said, pointing at a cluster of data points on the screen. "It's at a self-storage facility out by the county line. Secure store. And it's been there for 6 hours. They're not towing them to impound." I realized, the pieces finally clicking together. They're stashing them, cooling them off. "Exactly," Gina said. "Wait until the owner gives up or misses the auction notice. Then strip it or ship it." The petty harassment wasn't just petty anymore. It was a smokescreen. My Mustang wasn't prize. It was just another line item on a shopping list. They were running a shakedown, using the HOA bylaws as a legal crowbar to steal cars from working-class people who couldn't fight back. And I had a sickening feeling I knew exactly where this was going. "Get your coat, Gina," I said, grabbing my keys. "We're going for a ride. And bring the camera." The war of paper cuts was over. The real investigation was about to begin. The discovery of the tow ring shakedown changed everything. This was no longer a spat with a power-tripping HOA president. It was a criminal conspiracy. Neighbor Tony was heartbroken over his truck, but he was also furious. "All my tools, Frank," he said, staring at the empty curb. "My ladders, my saws, that's how I make a living. I can't replace that stuff overnight." I saw the desperation in his eyes, and it solidified my resolve. Karen Truman and her cronies had crossed a line. They weren't just being annoying. They were taking food off a working man's table. My world-weary cynicism was burned away by a cold, hard anger. This was my watch, and I wouldn't stand by while people like Tony got hit. "Gina," I said, turning to my wife, "how solid is that GPS data?" "Rock solid," she replied. "The truck is at Secure Store Unit C-17, and it hasn't moved." I couldn't use a full police task force. Not yet. An official investigation requires paperwork, judges, and time. Things that would tip off the suspects. If I filed for a warrant now, based only on suspicious GPS data obtained by my wife hacking a private company, a judge might laugh me out of chambers. Or worse, the tow company would get wind of it and scrub the unit clean before we arrived. This needed a quiet touch. I called in the one person I trusted implicitly, Sergeant Davis. He still felt guilty about the 911 call fiasco and was eager to make things right. I met him and Gina in my garage, the red Mustang standing silent witness. "This is completely off the books," I told him, leaning against a workbench. "No warrants, no official reports, no backup. We are just three concerned citizens going for a look. If we get caught, I can't protect you from a trespassing charge." Davis nodded, his face grim but determined. "Whatever you need, Chief. I owe you one. Plus, I hate car thieves." The plan was simple. We needed to get inside that storage facility and verify what was in Unit C-17. If we could get visual confirmation of stolen property, we could use that as probable cause to get a retroactive warrant and raid the place legally. We took my personal pickup truck, a beat-up Chevy that didn't scream police. Davis unscrewed the license plates in my driveway and swapped them with a set from an old junk car he had on his property. They were cold plates, untraceable to us if someone ran them quickly. It was a small detail, but in this line of work, small details keep you out of jail. We drove to Secure Store after dark. The facility was located in an industrial wasteland near the county line, surrounded by barbed wire fences and silence. It was a maze of identical corrugated steel doors under the harsh glare of sodium vapor lamps. Gina stayed home, but she was with us in spirit and in our ears. She had tapped into the facility's camera system. Gate camera is on a 5-minute loop. Her voice crackled in our earpieces. "The night guard is currently in the office watching Netflix. You have a window. Go now." I drove up to the keypad. Gina cycled the code remotely. Beep, buzz. The gate groaned open. We slipped inside, headlights off, rolling slowly on the gravel to minimize noise. The air was cold and smelled of dust, rust, and old tires. We parked in a blind spot behind row B, hidden from the main office. Unit C-17 is at the end of the next row. I whispered. Davis and I moved on foot. We stuck to the shadows, moving with the practiced rhythm of partners who had cleared hundreds of buildings together. We found Unit C-17. It was a large, double-wide unit with a heavy-duty padlock on the latch. Davis pulled a small leather pouch from his jacket, a lockpick set. He was an old-school cop who had come up in the days when knowing how to jimmy a lock was as important as knowing how to shoot. "Standard master lock," he muttered, inserting a tension wrench. "Cheap." He went to work. Click, scrape, click. I stood watch, listening to silence. Every distant highway sound made the hair on my arm stand up. "Got it," Davis whispered. The lock popped open. He slid the heavy door up just enough for us to slip underneath, about 3 feet. We rolled under, and I pulled it shut behind us, plunging us into absolute darkness. I clicked on a small tactical penlight. The beam cut through the dark, revealing the truth. It wasn't just a storage unit. It was a chop shop. Tony's F-150 was there, parked in the back, but it was already being stripped. The doors were off, leaning against the wall. The hood was up, and the engine block was hoisted on a chain, ready to be pulled. But it wasn't just Tony's truck. There were stacks of tires, rows of bumpers, and lining the wall like hunting trophies were dozens of license plates. Arizona, Nevada, California. Mother of God, Davis breathed, "This isn't a hobby. This is industrial." On a makeshift workbench under a dim battery-powered lamp sat a stack of paperwork. I walked over, my light tracing over the documents. They were forged tow authorizations. Each one detailed a bogus HOA violation, oil stains, flat tires, expired tags, and was signed at the bottom. Most of the signatures were a messy scrawl, but one caught my eye. It was on a form authorizing the tow of a 10-year-old minivan. The signature was elegant, looping, and perfectly clear. Karen Truman. She wasn't just reporting them. She was authorizing the disposal. But the real prize was underneath that stack. It was a binder full of blank vehicle titles and a professional-grade printing kit for creating new VIN plates. This was a sophisticated operation. They were cloning cars, stealing them, stripping the identity, giving them a new VIN from a wrecked car, and selling them clean. And sitting right next to the printer was a receipt book. It detailed payments made to a consultant. The payments were weekly, always in cash, and always signed for by the same person, Barry Jenkins. Barry Jenkins, I said, that's the HOA treasurer. Davis let out a low whistle. They've got the board involved. The president targets them. The treasurer cooks the books, and the tow company steals them. Not the whole board. I corrected, snapping photos of everything with my phone. Just the ones who handle the money and the enforcement. Karen and Barry. We worked quickly. Photos of the VINs. Photos of the forged signatures. Photos of the receipt book. We didn't take a physical thing. If we stole the evidence, it would be inadmissible fruit of a poisonous tree. We just needed the intel. Chief. Gina's voice was urgent in my ear. Guard is moving. He's doing a perimeter check. He's heading toward row C. You need to be out. Now. Copy, I said. Davis, let's go. We slid back under the door. Davis reattached the lock, clicking it shut just as the headlights of the guard's golf cart swept around the corner of the row. We dove behind a stack of pallets. The golf cart trundled past, the guard shining a flashlight lazily at the doors. He didn't see the scratches on the lock. He didn't see us. As soon as he turned the corner, we sprinted back to my truck. I started the engine, kept the lights off, and we rolled out the back exit that Gina had just remotely unlocked for us. We were a mile down the road before Davis finally exhaled. That was too close, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. But we got him, Chief. We have the proof. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. We have the truth, Davis. But we don't have the case. Not yet. What do you mean? We saw the truck. We saw Karen's signature. We saw it during an illegal break-in. I reminded him, if I take those photos to a judge, any half-decent lawyer will get the entire case thrown out on a technicality. Fruit of the poisonous tree. Karen and her crew would walk, and I'd be indicted for burglary. We drove back to my house in silence. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a grim tactical reality. We were sitting on a mountain of dynamite, but we didn't have a match. We needed a legal entry point. We needed a reason to be in that unit, or in Karen's office. That wasn't based on our midnight excursion. We needed a trigger, something that would let us kick down the door legally. We had poked the hornet's nest. Now, we had to figure out how to get the hornets to fly out into the open, right into our trap. We need to bait them, I said as we pulled into my driveway. We need them to commit a crime so blatant, so undeniable, that we can arrest them in the act. Davis looked at my garage. He looked at the red Mustang under cover. You're not thinking what I think you're thinking, he said. I looked at the car. My father's car. The object of Karen's obsession and George's greed. They want it, I said softly. Let's give them a chance to take it. The evidence from the storage unit was a bombshell, but it was also a hand grenade with the pin pulled. We couldn't use it in court. If we presented the photos of the stolen truck or the forged signatures, any defense attorney worth their salt would ask, do you have a warrant for that search? The answer would be no, and the case would be thrown out. Fruit of the poisonous tree, the judge would say. Karen and her crew would walk. They'd destroy the evidence, and I'd lose my badge for conducting an illegal break-in. We were sitting on a mountain of truth that we couldn't use. Gina, Davis, and I huddled in my garage, the photos from the storage unit displayed on Gina's laptop screen. The faces of Karen Truman and Barry the treasurer stared back at us from the forged documents. We need a clean lead. Davis said, rubbing his tired eyes. A piece of evidence we obtained by the book. One loose thread we can pull to unravel the whole thing legally. I knew he was right. We needed probable cause that wasn't tainted by our midnight excursion. We could try to get one of the other victims to file a formal complaint. I suggested, find someone whose car was stolen. Guide them. Tell them what to say. Gina shook her head. Too risky. They're just civilians. The tow company's lawyers would tear them apart, and Karen would intimidate them into silence before they even got to station. Look at Mrs. Alvarez. She's terrified to even leave her house. She was right. These were not hardened criminals we were dealing with. They were scared homeowners fighting a system designed to crush them. We needed to force Karen's hand. We needed her to commit a crime now, one that we could catch in real time. The Mustang, I said, looking at the red curve of the fender under the cover. It's the only thing she wants that she doesn't have. It's her blind spot. I decided to set a trap. I couldn't just leave the car out. That would look suspicious. I had to make her believe she had one. I started a rumor. I told neighbor Tony, knowing he was the neighborhood's most efficient gossip network, that I was finally giving up. I told him the HOA fines were too much, the legal threats were too scary, and that I'd be putting the Mustang up for sale. I can't fight City Hall, Tony. I said, putting on my best defeated face. I'm going to sell it. Maybe buy a Prius. Something compliant. I saw Tony's eyes widen. By noon, the whole street knew. By dinner, I was sure Karen knew. To sell the lie, I printed a for sale sign and tucked it under the Mustang's windshield wiper. I listed a price that was temptingly low and a phone number that routed to a burner phone on my desk. The bait was laid. I was counting on George's impatience and Karen's arrogance. I was betting they wouldn't wait for a buyer. They want to snatch it before it's sold, claiming some new violation to impound it, so George could get it for free at a rigged auction. But while I was setting my trap, a variable I hadn't accounted for entered the equation. Officer Miller. The rookie had been calling me once a week since the 9/11 ambush, ostensibly to ask for career advice. But I knew what he was really doing. He was trying to apologize, to make things right. He was a good kid, eager and earnest, with a strong sense of justice that hadn't been ground down by bureaucracy yet. He called me on Thursday night. Chief, he said, his voice a little shaky over the phone. I might have something. It's probably nothing, but it's been bugging me. I motioned for Gina to mute the TV. What is it, Miller? Well, sir, after that call at your house, I started paying more attention to the HOA complaints in that district, just keeping an eye out. And there's this one tow company, Reliable Roadside Recovery. Their name keeps popping up in the logs. My grip tightened on the phone. Is that so? Yes, sir. And I checked their business address listed on the citations. It's a P.O. box. But I ran the license plate of one of their trucks I saw on patrol. It's registered to a shell company owned by Oakwood Development. I felt a chill go down my spine. The kid had stumbled right into the middle of our investigation, all on his own. He had found the link between the tow company and the developer, Miller. I said, my voice stern, that's good work. That's good instinct. But listen to me very carefully. This is bigger than a few tow trucks. I want you to stand down. Do not engage. Write up what you have and send it to me directly. Do not go poking around. There was a pause on the other end. But Chief, if they're stealing cars. I said, stand down, Miller. That is an order. You are a patrol officer, not a detective. You don't have the backup for this. Do you understand? Yes, sir. I understand. But there was something in his voice, a hesitation, the eagerness of a rookie wanting to prove himself, to crack a big case. He wanted to impress the chief he'd almost tossed. I should have pushed harder. I should have ordered him to report to my office immediately to keep him off the street. But I didn't. That was my mistake. 2 days passed. The for sale sign sat on the Mustang. Gina monitored the burner phone, but no calls came. Karen was biding her time. Then, on Friday night, my personal cell phone rang. It was Miller's number. I answered, expecting a status report. Chief. His voice was a whisper, strained and full of static. He sounded like he was in pain. Miller? What's going on? I found them, Chief. I followed one of the tow trucks. I thought I could just get a picture of where they were taking the cars. Miller, where are you? I stood up, signaling to Gina. She was already at her keyboard, tracking his phone signal. The new development, he wheezed. Oakwood Phase 4. There's a model home at the end of the cul-de-sac. They're using it as a field office. I saw them pull a blue sedan into garage. I tried to get closer to verify the plate, but they have cameras. I didn't see the cameras. Miller, are you hurt? Are you safe? I'm in the woods across the street. I think they saw me. I dropped my radio. Suddenly, there was a noise on the line. A scuffle. The sound of dry leaves crunching under heavy boots. Hey, over here. A deep voice shouted in the background. Chief, there. Clatter. Thud. The phone sounded like it had been dropped. Then, a rough voice spoke, but not to me. Grab him. Get the phone. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. Frank. Gina said, her face pale. His GPS just went stationary. He's at the Oakwood construction site, but the signal is weak. They might have turned the phone off or destroyed it. The timer started. Every cop knows that feeling. The moment a situation turns from an investigation into a rescue. The moment the clock starts ticking on one of your own. All the careful planning, all the fruit of the poisonous tree caution. It was all out the window. One of my officers was in trouble. My officer. My rookie. And it was my fault. I had seen the warning signs, and I hadn't stopped him. Davis. I barked into phone, dialing his number before I'd even fully thought through plan. Meet me at the Oakwood construction site entrance on Mill Road. 10 minutes. No sirens. No radio. Come alone. Chief. Davis sounded confused. What's happening? Miller went rogue. He followed the bad guys. I think they have him. I hung up before he could answer. I grabbed a heavy-duty mag light from the workbench. Solid steel, capable of breaking a window or a jaw. I checked my off-duty pistol, a compact 9mm. Gina looked at me, fear in her eyes, but her hand steady on the keyboard. I've got the blueprints of the model home, she said, her voice all business. The chestnut floor plan. 2-story for bedrooms, attached 2-car garage. I'm patching the schematics to your phone now. I'll stay on comms. I nodded, giving her hand a quick squeeze. Keep an eye on his GPS. If it pings, you tell me. Immediately. As I ran out the door to my truck, my mind was racing. This was a legal entry point we needed, but it was the worst possible kind. Officer down. Officer missing. It was an exigent circumstance. It gave me the legal right to kick down any door to preserve life. We didn't need a warrant anymore. We just needed to get there before they did something permanent to Miller. The careful chess match with Karen Truman was over. Someone had knocked over the board. Now it was just a street fight in the dark, and one of my men was the prize. The drive to the Oakwood construction site was the longest 5 minutes of my life. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and every red light I ran felt like a ticking second off Miller's life. The new development was a ghost town after dark, a skeleton of half-finished houses and muddy roads that hadn't been paved yet. There were no streetlights, only the skeletal frames of timber jutting up against the night sky like rib cages. The air smelled of wet lumber, mud, and impending violence. Davis was waiting for me at the entrance as promised, his unmarked sedan tucked behind a stack of plywood. He got out as I pulled up, his face set like stone. He wasn't wearing his uniform hat, and in his hand, he held a heavy steel tire iron. Thought this might be quieter than the service weapon, he said grimly. Gunshots bring the county sheriff, and we don't have time to explain. I nodded, gripping my mag light. Agreed. Silence is speed. Gina says he's in the model home at the end of the main drag. The chestnut model. It's the only one with power. Let's go. We moved on foot, sticking to shadows cast by the construction equipment. The mud sucked at our boots, but we moved fast. Ahead, at the end of the cul-de-sac, the model home stood out like a beacon. It was fully finished with landscaping and lights on the porch. A fake, perfect house in the middle of a wasteland. And there, parked in the driveway, angled aggressively toward the garage, was a black tow truck. The logo on the door was barely visible in the dark. Reliable roadside recovery. That's the truck, Davis whispered. Miller was right. 2 men. Gina's voice whispered in my ear bud. I'm picking up two distinct cell signals inside, plus Miller's stationary signal. One is in the front living room. The other is in the back, near the kitchen or office. Copy, I whispered back. We crept around to the back of the house. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn, but I could see the flickering blue light of a television in the front room. The back of the house had a sliding glass door leading to a concrete patio. I tried the handle. Locked. Davis pointed to a standard window next to it. He produced a roll of duct tape from his jacket pocket. Another old cop trick. He taped a square over the glass near the latch, then used the handle of the tire iron to tap the center of the tape. Crumb. The glass shattered, but the tape held the pieces together, preventing the loud crash. He reached in, undid the latch, and slid the window up. We were in. The house smelled of new paint, cheap carpet, and stale cigarette smoke. We were in a generic stage kitchen. A bowl of plastic fruit sat on the granite countertop. From the adjoining living room, I could hear the low murmur of the TV and the sound of someone snoring. I signaled to Davis. You take the front. I take the back. He nodded and moved silently toward the living room. I moved down the hallway toward the back office, where Gina said Miller's signal was. As I neared the door, I heard voices. Don't know nothing. A voice whimpered. It was Miller. He sounded rough, his voice thick with pain. You're a cop, a rougher voice growled. Cops don't just wander around construction sites at night, looking for tow trucks. Who sent you? I told you, just patrolling. Liar. Thud. The sound of a fist hitting flesh. Miller cried out. My vision went red for a split second, but I forced it back down. Cold rage is useful. Hot rage makes you sloppy. I reached the door. It was slightly ajar. I peeked through the crack. Miller was tied to a chair in the center of the room. His face was bloody, one eye swollen shut. Standing over him was a wiry man in a leather jacket, holding a pistol loosely in his right hand. He was pacing, agitated. Boss is going to be here in 10 minutes, the wiry man said. He'll make you talk. I needed a distraction. I couldn't rush a man holding a gun to my officer's head. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the living room. Davis. He had engaged the target. The wiry man in the room spun around toward the door, distracted. Tony? What the hell was that? He took 2 steps toward the door, away from Miller. That was my opening. I kicked the door in. It flew open, slamming into the wall with a deafening bang. The wiry man spun back toward me, raising his gun, but he was too slow. I was already moving. I didn't go for my gun. I closed the distance. I grabbed his wrist with my left hand, twisting it up and away from me, and drove the heavy steel end of the maglite into his ribs with my right. Use of force continuum? In that moment, he was an armed combatant threatening a police officer. I hit him hard. He gasped, the air leaving his lungs, and the gun clattered to the floor. I swept his legs, driving him into the carpet face first. I put my knee in the center of his back and applied pressure until he groaned. Police! I shouted, the adrenaline finally surging. Don't move! I cuffed him quickly with zip ties I had in my pocket. Chief! Miller rasped in the chair. He looked like he'd gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight, but he was alive. I got you, kid, I said, cutting his bond with my pocket knife. You okay to stand? I think so. My ribs might be cracked. Davis appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath but unharmed. He was dragging the large man from the living room by the collar. The man was unconscious, a large lump forming on his forehead. Living room clear, Davis said, dropping the thug onto the floor next to his partner. Found a stash of burner phones and cash on the coffee table. I helped Miller to his feet. He leaned against the desk, swaying slightly. You did good, Miller, I said, looking him in the eye. You held out. I didn't tell him anything, Chief, he whispered. I swear. I know. I looked down at the wiry thug, who was now awake and glaring at me. You made a mistake, the thug spat. Do you know who we work for? I knelt down, getting right in his face. Yeah, you work for a developer who thinks he owns this town, an HOA president who thinks she's the Queen of England. But right now, you don't work for anyone. You are currently suspect number 1 in the kidnapping and attempted murder of a police officer. His eyes widened. He realized the gravity of the situation. Stealing cars is one thing. Killing ako. That brings down the wrath of God. Kidnapping, he stammered. We didn't kidnap him. He was trespassing. He was conducting an investigation. I said, standing up, and you detained him unlawfully and assaulted him. That gives me probable cause to search this entire building. Every inch of it, without a warrant. I looked at Davis. Call it in. Official channels now. Code 3. Officer down. Suspects in custody. Bring the cavalry. Davis grinned, pulling out his radio. The one he hadn't used on the approach. Dispatch. This is Sergeant Davis. 10 to 99 at the Oakwood construction site. Officer requires medical. 2 suspect detained. Send the house. The exigent circumstance of the rescue had given us the legal key because we had entered to save Miller. Anything we found in plain view was admissible. And in plain view, on the desk right next to where Miller had been tied up, was a laptop. The screensaver had deactivated during the scuffle. It showed a spreadsheet titled Inventory. Q3. I tapped the trackpad. It was a list. Hundreds of cars. Make, model, VIN, and acquisition source. And under acquisition source, over and over again was the name HOA Truman. Miller stumbled over, looking at the screen. That's the smoking gun, Miller, I said. You found it. You bled for it, but you found it. Sirens began to wail in the distance. Real ones this time. Dozens of them. The sound was beautiful. The boss said he was coming. Miller said suddenly, looking at the door. The guy said his boss would be here in 10 minutes. I checked my watch. 5 minutes had passed. Davis, I said, get the suspects into the back room. Keep them quiet. Turn off the lights. What are you thinking, Chief? If the boss is coming, I said, holstering my weapon and picking up the wiry thug's pistol, careful not to smudge prints. We should give him a warm welcome. We moved the prisoners. Davis stayed with Miller. I stood in the darkened hallway, waiting. 3 minutes later, headlights swept across the front window. A luxury SUV pulled into the driveway next to the tow truck. The front door opened. A man in an expensive suit walked in, looking annoyed. He was holding a briefcase. Why are the lights off? He shouted. Jenkins, did you get the cop to shut up yet? He walked into the living room, blind to the danger. I stepped out of the shadows, flipping on the mag light directly into his face. Police! I shouted. Get on the ground. The man froze, dropping the briefcase. It popped open as it hit the floor. Bundles of cash spilled out. Thousands of dollars. And sitting right on top of the money was a file folder labeled Monthly Distributions K. Truman. The man squinted against the light. It was the CEO of Oakwood Development. Chief Dillon? He stammered, recognizing me. What is the meaning of this? I'm just here to check on my construction site. At 11 p.m., with a briefcase full of cash and a kidnapping victim in the back room, I stepped closer. You have the right to remain silent, and I highly suggest you use it, because your employees are going to flip on you in about 5 minutes. Davis walked in, supporting Miller. Book him, Davis, I said. Racketeering, conspiracy, kidnapping. As the sirens grew deafening outside, I walked over to the open briefcase. I looked at the file labeled Truman. We had the developer, we had the muscle, we had the money trail, but we still needed the head of the snake. We needed Karen. And thanks to the date on the file, which indicated the next payout was due tomorrow at the HOA Gala, I knew exactly where to find her. The rescue was over. The investigation was airtight. Now it was time for the show. The rescue of Officer Miller was the crack in the dam. Once that water started flowing, nothing could stop it. Within an hour of the CEO's arrest, the model home was swarming with forensics teams, detectives, and CSI photographers. I stepped back, letting Sergeant Davis take the official lead on the scene. To the rest of the department, I was just a chief who responded to an officer down call. Only Davis, Miller, and I knew how long we had really been watching. The 2 thugs we arrested were small-time muscle, and they weren't talking yet. They lawyered up immediately. But their silence didn't matter. Their presence at the model home, guarding a kidnapped officer and a briefcase full of illicit cash, gave us the legal justification we needed to get warrants for everything. And that is when Gina truly went to work. I sat at my kitchen table at 3 a.m., nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, watching her orchestrate the digital investigation. She had remote access to the department's server, helping the cybercrimes unit process the laptop we seized from the model home. "It's a gold mine, Frank," she said, her eyes glued to the screen. They didn't even encrypt the folders. Arrogance is a hell of a drug. First came the warrants to the reliable roadside recovery office, a dingy room above a laundromat, and the HOA main office. Signed by a sleepy judge before sunrise, the search of the tow company office yielded the Holy Grail, a desktop computer containing the original templates for the fake HOA violation notices. "Look at this," Gina said, pulling up a file. "They have templates for everything. Oil stain, grass height, unauthorized decor. They just fill in the address and print." "I need a physical link," I said, thinking like a prosecutor. "Digital files are good, but I need something tangible that puts those notices in Karen's hands." I called the head of our forensics lab. "I need a toner analysis. Compare the toner from the HOA office printer with the toner from the fake violation notices we've been collecting from the neighbors." The call came back 3 hours later. "It's a perfect match, Chief. Not just the same brand. The exact same chemical batch. The defects in the drum unit match the streaks on the tickets. Those fake fines were printed on the HOA's official machine. We now had a direct physical link between the criminal conspiracy and Karen Truman's office. She wasn't just aware of it. She was printing the extortion letters herself. But the final nail in the coffin came from the money. Armed with the CEO's briefcase and the ledger we found, we got a warrant for the bank record of the HOA, Oakwood Development, and the personal accounts of Karen Truman and Barry Jenkins. Gina, who used to hunt money launderers for the feds, lit up like a kid on Christmas. She spent the entire next day mapping the flow of money. It was a beautiful, simple, and utterly damning picture. "Here's how it worked," she explained, pointing to a flow chart she projected onto our living room TV. "Oakwood Development makes large lump sum payments to the HOA for community improvement projects. Perfectly legal on paper. But look where the money goes." She traced a red line. "Most of it goes into the general fund, but a specific percentage, always exactly 15%, is transferred by Barry Jenkins into a separate account labeled Consulting Retainer. From that account, Barry makes weekly cash withdrawals. The cash we found in the briefcase." I noted, "Exactly. But here's the kicker." She tapped another line. "Direct bank transfers from Barry's slush fund to a personal account belonging to Karen Truman. The memo line on each transfer is the same. Consulting fee." "She was getting a cut," I said, shaking my head. "A big one." She wasn't just a power-tripping volunteer. She was a paid partner. She provided the legal cover and the targets. Barry cooked the books. The developers' thugs did the dirty work. And they all got rich. We had it all. Ring cam clips, toner matches, hard drive originals, bank transfers, and a kidnap cop. We had enough to put them all away for 20 years on charges of racketeering RICO, conspiracy, grand theft auto, and kidnapping. I could have sent a squad car to pick Karen up right then. I could have dragged her out of her house in handcuffs in front of the neighbors. But there was one thing that still bothered me. George, Karen's sniveling, entitled son. His name wasn't on the bank records. He wasn't in the logbooks. He was a ghost. Yet, I knew with a gut certainty that he was a catalyst. Karen was ruthless and greedy, yes, but she was also a doting mother. I suspected this whole acceleration, targeting my car specifically, wasn't just about money. It was about giving her worthless son everything he ever wanted, including a classic muscle car he didn't deserve. "If we arrest Karen now," I told Davis over the phone, "George might slip through the cracks. He'll claim he didn't know anything, that he's just a kid living with his mom. He'll play the victim." "So what do you want to do, Chief?" Davis asked. "We can't sit on these warrants forever. I don't want to sit on them. I want to execute them when they are all together, when they feel safest. And I want to catch George with his hand in the cookie jar." I looked at the calendar on the wall. Saturday, annual HOA Gala. It was the biggest social event of the year. A black-tie dinner in a massive tent on the community green. The theme was building our future. The guest of honor was supposed to be the CEO of Oakwood Development, who was currently sitting in a holding cell, though he had kept his arrest out of the press so far. It was a perfect stage. "They've tried to steal my car twice now," I said to Gina, "and they failed because I stopped them. I think it's time we let them succeed." Gina looked at me. understanding dawning in her eyes. You want to use the Mustang as bait. The for sale sign was too slow, I said. They didn't bite. They're getting desperate because the boss, the CO, has gone silent. They don't know he's arrested yet. They just think he's ghosting them. They need a win. They need a big donation to show off at the gala, to distract the neighbors from the rumors. So we give them one. Gina said. We hatched the final plan. It required precision timing. I went to the garage. I removed the for sale sign. I washed the car until it gleamed like a ruby. Then, I did something that felt like a betrayal of my common sense. I opened the garage door halfway, and I hung a spare set of keys on a magnetic hook just inside the frame, clearly visible from the street. It was a rookie mistake. A stressed-out homeowner, defeated by the HOA, forgetting to close up shop. Then, Gina and I went to work on the car itself. We couldn't use standard police trackers. They are bulky. Gina used her tools to install a micro GPS tracker inside the speedometer housing. Then, she replaced the vintage AM radio with a dummy unit that concealed a high-fidelity, voice-activated listening device with a cellular uplink, military grade. She said, soldering the final wire. It broadcasts live audio to a secure server. We'll hear them breathe. We obtained an emergency judicial order authorizing recording, citing the kidnapping investigation. The judge signed it without hesitation. On the morning of the gala, I saw George walk past my house. He slowed down. He saw the open garage door. He saw the glint of the keys on the hook. He stopped. He looked around. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Gina, monitoring the clone of Karen's phone we had authorized, played the audio for me a minute later. Mom, George's voice whispered. The keys are there. The door is open. He's not home. Take it, Karen's voice replied. She sounded stressed but greedy. Bring it to the tent behind the stage before the gala starts. We'll announce it as a generous donation from a resident leaving the community. Once it's donated to the HOA, it's ours. We'll sell it to ourselves for $1 later. You're a genius, Mom, George said. Just don't scratch it, you idiot. I looked at Gina. They're gonna steal it and claim I donated it. It's bold, Gina admitted. Stupid, but bold. It's grand theft auto, I corrected, and conspiracy, and fraud, and we have it on tape. I looked at the Mustang, my dad's car. It was about to go into the lion's den. Don't worry, Gina said, patting the fender. She's tough. She can handle a few miles with a moron behind the wheel. I'm not worried about the car. I lied. I'm worried I might enjoy this too much. The trap was set. The warrants were printed. The team was ready. Tonight, the monarch of Oak Creek Estates was throwing a party to celebrate her power. She had no idea she was throwing her own retirement party, and the venue would be a prison cell. The night of the annual HOA Gala was dark and stormy. A heavy, relentless autumn rain drummed against the roof of the massive white tent erected on the community green, muffling the sounds of the mediocre jazz trio playing inside. It was a perfect weather for a sting operation. The rain kept people huddled inside, and the thunder masked the sound of tires on pavement. I put on a suit that felt tight in the shoulders. I hadn't worn it since the mayor's inauguration. Gina wore a simple black dress that made her look like a spy in a Bond movie. She slipped a small tablet into her clutch purse. As we were about to leave, Sergeant Davis arrived at my back door. He was in full uniform, looking sharp and intimidating. The perimeter is set, Chief, he said, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. I've got 4 plainclothes officers inside the tent posing as caterers. 2 patrol units are staged a block away in the church parking lot. We're ready on your signal. No sirens until the cuffs are out, I reminded him. I want her to think she's winning right up until the moment she loses everything. Understood. Good hunting, sir. Gina and I walked under a large umbrella to the community green. The tent was packed. 300 neighbors in their best clothes, drinking cheap wine and forcing smiles. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of damp wool. At the head table, raised on a dais like a throne, sat Karen Truman. She was wearing a sparkling silver dress that cost more than my first car. She looked every bit the queen of her domain, holding court with the other board members. Barry the treasurer was there, too, sweating profusely in an ill-fitting tuxedo, his eyes darting around the room nervously. But there were 2 empty chairs at the head table. One was for the CEO of Oakwood Development, who was currently being processed at county jail. The other was for George. Gina and I got drinks and blended into the crowd, positioning ourselves near one of the main tent poles where we had a clear view of the stage and the main entrance flaps. My earpiece was silent. Gina had her phone in her hand, disguised as if she were checking messages, but I knew she was monitoring the live feed from the Mustang. GPS is active, she whispered to me, not moving her lips. Vehicle is moving. It's leaving our garage. My heart hammered against my ribs. George had taken the bait. Audio, I asked. She tapped her screen. Through my earpiece, I heard the roar of the Boss 429 engine, a sound I knew better than my own voice. And over the engine noise, I heard George. Oh, yeah, this is it. George's voice crackled, sounding giddy. Listen to that power. Mom is gonna love this. He was driving my father's car. The rage flared up, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. Let him drive it. I told myself. He's driving it straight to prison. He's circling the block, Gina reported, heading for the service entrance behind the stage. 10 minutes later, Karen stood up. She tapped her champagne glass with a spoon, the sharp ting-ting-ting silencing the room. She walked to the podium, adjusting the microphone. Welcome, neighbors, she beamed. Despite the weather, our spirit shines bright. Tonight is about celebrating our community, about compliance and cooperation. There was a polite, scattered applause. People were terrified of her, not fond of her. I have some wonderful news, she continued, her voice dripping with fake enthusiasm. Our partners at Oakwood Development couldn't be here tonight due to unforeseen business urgency, but they sent their regards. She paused for dramatic effect. And we have a very special surprise. A demonstration of how this community comes together. One of our residents who has had some struggles with our high standards has decided to do the right thing. I squeezed Gina's hand. Here it comes. Mr. Frank Dillon, she announced, gesturing vaguely in my direction, though she couldn't see me in the back, has generously decided to donate his vintage vehicle to the association. We will be auctioning it off to fund our new security patrol vehicle. A gasp went through the crowd. My neighbors knew that car. They knew how much I loved it. They looked at each other, confused. Donate? Frank? Bring it in. Karen shouted, waving her arm toward the main tent flaps. As if on cue, the flaps were pulled back. The headlights of the Mustang cut through the smoky air of the tent. The deep, guttural rumble of the V8 engine drowned out the rain. George drove it slowly into the tent, navigating between the round tables. The candy apple red paint gleamed under the stage lights. He looked triumphant, grinning from ear to ear, waving like a celebrity. He stopped the car right in front of the stage, leaving the engine idling. The sound was aggressive, a mechanical growl that vibrated in your chest. Karen clapped her hands. Let's give a hand to George Truman for facilitating this wonderful donation. This was her narrative. She had rewritten reality. She was stealing my car in front of 300 witnesses and calling it charity. Now, I said to Gina. Gina tapped her tablet. Suddenly, the jazz music over the PA system cut out. A new sound filled the tent. It was crystal clear, broadcast at maximum volume through the massive speakers hanging from the ceiling. It was a recording from 10 minutes ago. Mom, George's voice boomed over the crowd. The keys are there. The door's open. He's not home. The crowd froze. Karen's smile faltered. She looked at the sound technician. Confusion clouded her eyes. Then, Karen's own voice filled the room, shrill and undeniable. Take it. Bring it to the tent. We'll announce it as a generous donation. Once it's donated to the HOA, it's ours. We'll sell it to ourselves for $1 later. The silence in the tent was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Karen's face went white. She looked like she had been slapped. She grabbed the microphone. That is a doctored tape. That is AI. Turn it off. But the audio continued. Just don't scratch it, you idiot. Panic erupted in Karen's eyes. She realized the trap had snapped shut. She looked at George, who was sitting in the car, looking around wildly, realizing something had gone wrong. George, she shrieked. Get out of here. Drive. George, in a blind panic, slammed his foot on the gas. The 429 engine roared. Tires spun on the slick, temporary vinyl flooring of the tent, smoking and screeching. The car fishtailed, knocking over a table of hors d'oeuvres. People screamed and scrambled out of the way. He was going to plow right through the crowd to get to the exit. I didn't hesitate. I broke from the crowd, vaulting over a chair. "Police!" I shouted, my voice booming. Nobody move. I ran toward the car. George saw me coming, a big, angry man in a suit charging at him. He panicked even more, wrenching the wheel to the left. The car lurched, sliding sideways, and slammed its rear quarter panel into the heavy wooden support of the stage. Crunch. The impact stalled the engine. Silence returned to the tent, save for the hiss of the radiator. I reached the driver's side door before George could restart it. I wrenched the door open. "Get out!" I roared. George looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't steal it. You donated it," my mom said. I grabbed him by the collar of his tuxedo jacket and hauled him out of the car. I spun him around and slammed him against the doorframe, gently enough not to break anything, but hard enough to let him know the joyride was over. "You have the right to remain silent," I shouted, slapping my spare cuffs on him. On stage, Karen was trying to run. She scrambled toward the back curtain. "Not so fast, Karen." Sergeant Davis emerged from behind the back curtain, blocking her path. He was flanked by 2 officers. "Karen Truman," Davis said, his voice projecting to the entire room. "You're under arrest for racketeering, insurance fraud, grand theft auto, and conspiracy." Karen froze. She looked at the crowd. Her neighbors, the people she had bullied, fined, and terrorized for years. They weren't looking at her with fear anymore. They were looking at her with disgust. And some were smiling. "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I am the president. I am enforcing the rules." "The rule of law supersedes the bylaws, ma'am," Davis said, spinning her around. Click, click. The sound of handcuffs latching onto Karen Truman's wrist was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. "And Barry!" Gina shouted from the crowd, pointing at the treasurer who was trying to crawl under a table. "Don't forget the money man." 2 plainclothes officers, still wearing their catering aprons, hauled Barry out by his waistband. He was sobbing loudly. The tent was in chaos, but it was a controlled chaos. The red and blues finally lit up outside, washing the white tent in flashing police lights. I handed George over to Officer Miller, who had walked in with a backup team. Looking bruised, but standing tall. "He's all yours, Miller," I said. Miller took George's arm. "Let's go, tough guy." I turned back to the car. My dad's car. There was a dent in the rear bumper and a scratch on the quarter panel from the stage impact. My heart sank a little, but then I looked at Karen being led away, kicking and screaming, her silver dress mud-stained from where she had dropped her knees. I looked at the neighbors. Tony was standing on a chair, cheering. Mrs. Alvarez was clapping. I ran my hand over the hood of the Mustang. "It's just a scratch, Dad," I whispered. "Worth it." I walked up to the microphone Karen had just vacated. The feedback squealed for a second. "Folks," I said, catching my breath, "I'm sorry about the party. And the car." I looked at the crowd. "But I think we can all agree the HOA meeting is adjourned." The tent erupted in cheers. It wasn't just applause. It was a liberation celebration. The tyrant had fallen. Her prince was in cuffs, and the castle was crumbling. But as I looked at the flashing lights, I knew the paperwork was going to be a nightmare. The collapse of the Truman dynasty wasn't a slow erosion. It was controlled demolition. With Karen, George, and Barry cuffed and stuffed into the back of patrol units, the silence that fell over the neighborhood wasn't fearful anymore. It was the silence of relief. The storm had passed, both literally and metaphorically. The legal proceedings moved with a speed that surprised even me. Usually, white-collar crime drags on for years, buried in motions and continuances. But we had something rare, a perfect chain of evidence and a co-conspirator who was terrified of prison. Barry Jenkins, the HOA treasurer, lasted exactly 11 minutes in the interrogation room before he broke. He didn't just sing, he composed an entire opera. He laid out the scheme in excruciating detail. How Karen used the bylaws to mark targets, how reliable roadside recovery yanked the cars, and how Oakwood Development washed them into their fleet or sold them for parts. In return for a plea deal that kept him out of maximum security, Barry handed over the ledgers we hadn't found yet. the ones hidden in a safe deposit box. They showed that the scheme had been running for 3 years across 4 different subdivisions. The CEO of Oakwood Development tried to fight. He hired a team of expensive lawyers who arrived in town like a flock of vultures. But when the district attorney played the audio recording from the gala, Karen's voice explicitly detailing the theft, the developer folded. He pleaded guilty to racketeering and agreed to liquidate assets to pay restitution to the victims. But Karen was proud to the bitter end. She refused the deal. She sat in the courtroom during her trial, back straight, wearing a modest suit, and glared at the jury. Her defense was a masterclass in delusion. She claimed she was a community protector, that the theft were actually administrative asset seizures designed to maintain property values. She honestly believed that her bylaws superseded state law. The jury didn't buy it. They listened to the tapes. They looked at the forged signatures, and they looked at the photos of Tony's strip truck. They deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had clearly dealt with her fair share of HOAs, threw the book at her. 10 years in state prison. No parole for at least 6. As the bailiff led her away, she didn't scream or cry. She just looked at me, sitting in the front row next to Gina, and whispered, "The grass is getting long, Frank." "I like it long," I replied. George was a different story. His lawyer successfully argued that he was a pawn under the influence of a domineering mother. He avoided prison time, but his sentence was arguably worse for someone with his ego. 5 years of probation and 2,000 hours of community service. And the judge, in a moment of poetic justice, assigned his service location to Oak Creek Estates. Every Saturday morning, I drink my coffee on the porch and watch George Truman, wearing a bright orange vest, picking up trash along the sidewalks and scrubbing graffiti off the retaining walls. He doesn't look at my house. He keeps his head down. The neighbors don't harass him. They just ignore him. He has become exactly what he feared most. Invisible. The neighborhood itself underwent a transformation. The court placed the HOA into receivership, dissolving the old board immediately. Auditors traced every fake fine and every stolen vehicle. The restitution fund from Oakwood Development paid everyone back. Neighbor Tony rolled up to my house 2 months later in a brand new Ford F-250, paid for by the settlement. He was grinning like he'd won the lottery. "It's got heated seats, Frank," he shouted, slapping the dashboard. "And a toolbox that locks. Coffee is on me for the next year. And donuts, if you're twisting my arm." We held a special election for the new HOA board. There were no campaigns, no speeches about compliance. Just neighbors talking over beers. Tony was elected president by a landslide. His first motion was to nuke the rule book. Section 8.3c, the rule about non-operational vehicles, was the first to go into history's shredder. As long as it doesn't have rats living in it and isn't leaking plutonium, Tony announced at the first meeting, "Park whatever the hell you want." The block parties returned. The fear evaporated. The neighborhood became what we had moved here for, a home. Officer Miller received a commendation for his bravery and a promotion to detective. He still calls me for advice, but his voice doesn't shake anymore. He learned the most important lesson of the job early. The badge isn't a shield to hide behind. It's a tool to protect others. As for me, a few weeks after the trial, on a crisp autumn Saturday, Gina and I stood in the garage. The garage door was wide open. The Mustang sat there. The Boss 429. It still had the dent in the rear bumper from the stage impact. I could have had it fixed. The restitution check would have covered it easily, but I decided to leave it. It was a battle scar. A reminder that even precious things can take a hit and keep running. On the workbench sat the vehicle title. It had been trapped in legal limbo for years because I hadn't finished the transfer paperwork after my dad died. Gina handed me a pen. "It's time, Frank." I looked at the owner line. My father's name was still there, printed in the dot matrix font of the 1980s. For a long time, I had avoided changing it. I felt like signing it over to myself was a final goodbye, an admission that he was really gone. "He would have loved what you did," Gina said softly, reading my mind. "You used his car to take down a bad guy. That's the most dad thing you could have done." She was right. The car wasn't a shrine. It was a machine. A machine meant to be driven, meant to be used. I took the pen. I crossed out the old information and signed my name firmly on the new buyer line. Frank Dillon. Now it's official. Gina smiled. It's your car. Oh wait, I didn't know I was carrying slit off my shoulders. Let's tackle that carburetor, I said, rolling up my sleeves. I promised Tony a ride. It took us 3 weekends to get it running right. We replaced the fuel lines, rebuilt the carb, and flushed the fluids. Gina, with her delicate hands, was better at the fine-tuning than I was. When we finally turned the key, the engine didn't just start. It exploded into life. That deep, rhythmic lope of a high-compression V8 echoed off the garage walls, shaking the tools on the pegboard. It was the sound of American history. It was the sound of freedom. I backed it out of the driveway. George, picking up trash across the street, Gina hopped in the passenger seat, wearing sunglasses and a scarf. Where to, Chief? Anywhere but the impound lot. I grinned. I dropped the hammer. The tires chirped, biting into the asphalt, and the Mustang launched forward, pinning us to the vinyl seats. We roared past the empty model home, past the spot where Miller was held, past the community green where Karen had tried to humiliate me. We drove out of the subdivision and onto the highway, leaving the politics and the petty tyrant behind in the rear-view mirror. The silence we moved here for had finally returned, but it wasn't an empty silence anymore. It was earned. I kept my rank off the welcome email. I'm not the chief here. I'm just Frank, the guy with the loud red car, the smart wife, and the native plants in his front yard. And if Karen's ghost ever haunts this neighborhood, wondering what became her kingdom, the answer is simple. It stopped being a kingdom and finally became a neighborhood.